Welcome to the channel. We're playing 20 questions with.
Mick Lampard. I'm the Offstage me on YouTube where I review fountain pens and ink and all that kind of stuff.
All right, let's get into the questions. When I
Let's
say
do
pen,
it.
what pen do you think of?
One of the iconic ones, like a Mont Blanc 149 or the Pelican M1000, something like that. Just because I think when you envision sort of a fountain pen, you do think sort of luxury. You think that that's what I automatically bring to my mind.
Great. How did you get into pens?
I was always a stationery nerd at school, and when I was a teenager, I won a writing competition, and the prize was a fountain pen. It was a Parker Sonnet, and I had no idea what I was doing with it, and it was completely wasted on me. But it did sort of sow that seed of something that these are a special thing, and I was hooked from then.
What I'm learning is that many of us started as stationary nerds, even if we weren't originally fountain pens.
I think so. Like in school, it was like I had to have the best. I remember, sitting down with my dad and for 45 minutes to pick my pen for when I got my pen license in year three or year four, whatever it was. And I just wanted the best pen. I wanted the one that felt right for me. And yeah, and now I do it for my life. Yeah.
What was your the Parker Sonnet was your first pen. What was your first pen when you got back into it?
So I I sort of fluked back into fountain pens after university. I was on tour in China. I'm an opera singer for my day job, and I was touring in China, and my pen that I had with me ran out of ink, and so I went to a supermarket and I bought the first pen I saw on the shelf, and it was a fountain pen. I didn't realize at the time. I just thought it was a pen, and so I got back to my hotel and was got this fountain pen. I was like, okay, so that was like a Hero 9,000 something fountain pen, and yeah, then I was like, okay, I need to do something serious with this, and did the typical Lamy All Star, Pilot Metropolitan, that kind of stuff.
What's your current daily driver?
Oh, at the moment, it's a vintage pen. So I've got this, which is the Anoto Pen Master. It's just a very simple, no frills, sort of vintagey pen. But I kind of love carrying a vintage pen as opposed to a sort of a modern pen, even though I don't have a whole lot of vintage pens in my collection, but that one just feels nice to sort of carry, and it's something a little bit different. So I enjoy that. But normally it'll be, like a Lamy 2000 or a Pilot Custom 823 or something like that.
Hey, what's your favorite ink?
Diamine Oxford Blue, no questions. It is the best. I love how wet it is. I love how dark and rich it is. I love that you get little tealy tones coming through in the lighter shading. It's perfect, and it's cheap. Like Diamine inks, that's where I go.
What's your favorite brand of either pens or ink?
Okay, so for pens, I'd have to say it's Pilot. I just think that the nibs are remarkable, and like the 74, the 823, the 845, they're just pens that fit really well in my hand. And for ink, I would probably say either Robert Oster. I have to say that as an Australian. And they're beautiful inks, don't get me wrong. Like Tranquility is right up there as one of my favorite inks. But yeah, either Robert Oster or Diamine.
Vintage or modern?
This is hard because I really love the vintage pens I have, but I don't have a great deal of them or a great deal of knowledge about them. I'm enjoying them more and more, but I would probably say modern just for the convenience. And I'm a writer. I'm a pen user. I'm not just a collector, and I want my pens to be able to be cleaned easily, and I can do the repairs on them and all those kinds of things. So yeah, probably go with modern.
Okay. Do you swatch all your inks?
I used to swatch every ink until I got up to over 1,000 swatches, and then I was like, I have no way of maintaining this over time. So now basically, I do writing sample with every ink or ink sample that I get. So I I always dip it in with a glass pen or something like that, and get some sort of writing to get an idea of the color. And then the only inks I swatch are ones that I need to use for review or for Instagram and that kind of stuff. So it got too much. I'd probably be up around the 1,300 now if I'd done everyone.
Okay, that's an impressive ink collection.
It's a lot of ink, and I'm in a fortunate position. The fact that I do a lot of these reviews and I have connections, and with a lot of brands and retailers. And but I find myself using only maybe 15 to 20 inks, a lot. And those inks I know, and those are, and so when you have these 1,300 inks, it's actually much harder to pick an ink to use. Having fewer choices makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. Like sometimes,
Yeah,
and most of these are in sample vials. Like I can't imagine having that many bottles.
it's a kind of I I moved from Melbourne to Sydney recently, and I did a bit of a cull, and I actually sold a few tubs of ink to a local artist, and it was, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'll get rid of a couple of hundred bottles, and then I looked at what was left, and it was still a ridiculous amount of ink.
Yep. Do any pens always get inked up with the same ink, or do you always switch it up?
There's a couple of pens that will be inked with the same ink regularly. So, for instance, Diamond Oxford Blue, I find that in my Lamy 2000 quite a lot. Robert Oster Soda Pop Blue in my Visconti Homo Sapiens, just because those are inks I sort of associate a little bit with those pens. But I have too many pens and too many inks that I love just to sort of just have the same one in each sort of consecutively. So yeah, there are some patterns, but not all the time.
Yeah. Do you keep your nib writing samples so you know the nib in every pen, or do you just know the nib in every pen?
I still have the writing sample from every review I've done. I find it really hard to throw out notebooks once they're done. I kind of end up bringing them into archive boxes and storing them away. So I do keep every writing sample, but I generally kind of, when you spend 3-4 weeks with a pen to review it, you get to know it well. You get to know what it does, and then I kind of, I suppose I remember quite well what is what, and particularly I remember what I really like, and those are the ones obviously I keep coming back to.
What's a pen you wish you'd see in person?
Okay, so I'm going to give you two answers for this. One that I could just probably go to a decent retailer and see, and that is the new blue version of the Pilot Custom Urushi. I really want a Custom Urushi. Like that's my sort of one of my next, hopefully, big pen purchases. But some of those beautiful Yada lead pens are really up there for me. I haven't seen any of those in person yet, and I think if I did, it would be dangerous because I would end up having to buy at least one.
I finally saw Yarda Leads in person recently and got to test drive one.
Oh,
yeah. So it's fabulous.
Yeah, I think that would be a dangerous sort of a dangerous brand for me to have in my hand, unfortunately.
That's fair. What's your current grail?
So this one has been my grail for a couple of years. It's the Visconti Brunelleschi, which is it's a beautiful pen, simple. It's sort of like, it's not particularly over the top, like a lot of Visconti sort of can be. But it's the one that's made with the infused with like the terracotta, the same terracotta used for the Duomo in Florence, which I love Florence. Florence has a big place in the history of opera, and as you know, I'm an opera singer, so there's lots of connections like that. It's sort of got like a rose goldy kind of trim, and I saw one at the Melbourne Pen Show a couple of years ago in an extra fine nib, and I was like, no, I'm going to hold out because I want a fine or a medium. So I decided to hold out, and every day I regret not buying in person because it was there, it was in my hand. So yeah,
I'm sure at some point you'll find another one.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's a great pen. It's a beautiful, it feels great in the hand. So
yeah, I've seen pictures of it, but it is.
It's very, it's like, as I said, it's not over the top. It's kind of like a red, sort of reddy brown, same as like the Visconti Homo sapien. It's like the bronze, the lava one, right? So it's kind of got that same sort of matte kind of texture to it, and it ticks all my boxes.
Right. What pen would you recommend to a beginner?
I feel like my answer here is going to be a, a bit sort of standard, because for me, I think the Pilot Kakuno is probably like a classic. For me, if any pen is going to inspire someone to go, oh, what's next? I think it's a Kakuno, because it's a lightweight plastic, which is fine, but that nib is amazing. But if someone wants to go like the next level, if they want to start with something that is a little bit more sort of uh, next level, I'd actually send them towards like Benu or something like that, because Benu have amazing pans and the nibs write incredibly, and depending on the model, extra fine through to broad and all that kind of stuff. But they have something for everyone, and particularly like the new ones that are being released, like the Pixie and things like that, with some more sort of standard black blue sort of colors. You are going to have something sort of for everyone. Like sitting just here, I've got my this is the Beam Me Up from the Painted series, so it's like the space themed one.
The honey.
Yeah. Like they're just great pens. So I think if someone wants to skip that sort of entry level and like invest, I'd send them probably to Benu.
Yeah, the Kakano is very much like I agree with your like gateway pen. Like
absolutely.
Started with a Kakano. I already had an established pen collection when Mom got her Kakano about 15 months ago, and now she's got 12 pens and got herself Gold Rush for Christmas. Like Kakanos are very much like that. They've got a smiley face on the nib, like they don't look intimidating.
Exactly.
Suddenly you're spending hundreds of dollars on pens,
which is easy to do. Like, and the thing is with the Kakunos, like I love the Metropolitan, the Safari, and all those as well. Don't get me wrong. And there's even something like the Chinese brands, like the Hongdian C1 is a great entry level pen. But I think the in the hand experience of the Pilot just sets it apart.
Yeah.
So it really makes you want to know what is next.
What ink would you recommend to a beginner?
So if you want like a blue, Waterman Serenity blue. If you want a black, I actually suggest Lamy black. They're really readily available, all that kind of stuff. But I also just say to people, go to Diamine, because they write really well. Their performance is great. They're affordable. They're readily sold at a lot of retailers. But there's such a wide variety of colors that I can say, oh, you want an ink? What color? Like, oh, I want a purple. You go, oh, we'll get Monbotto's hat, get Imperial purple. I want an orange. There's 18 different options. So Diamine have such a great variety of inks, and they all, for the most part, they all perform really well. There's a little bit of variance, like Writer's Blood, for instance, is exceptionally wet and quite an aggressive ink, but it's such a great color. So if they want to use great paper, yeah, something like that is great. But generally speaking, Diamine is where I generally send people.
What advice do you have for somebody who wants to try fountain pens but might be a bit intimidated by them?
It's just a pen. Like, really, a fountain pen is a pen. If you write, if you're journaling, if you're planning, if you're taking notes, whatever the case may be, it's just a pen. Yes, there's a few fiddly things. You need to be a little bit more aware of the paper you're writing on. You need to be a little bit more aware of the fact that you can get ink on your fingers occasionally, things like that. But it is just a pen, and they're tools for us to write with. They're tools for us to enjoy writing with. So my advice is just go out and do it. Go to a pen shop. Try and find a brick and mortar that you can actually go to. Test out some pens. Hold them in your hand. Honestly, if you've never used a fountain pen before and you pick up a Coco Sport or a Lamy Safari or a Kakuno or something and you start writing with it, you will get it. You will understand why this is such a wonderful, medium to write with. So just do it. Just if you're interested in it, go to a store, or jump on eBay or AliExpress or something and pick up something affordable. Watch some reviews so you're not getting something dodgy, but go out and do it. We need more fountain pen users in the world. If there are more fountain pen users, there are more people supporting brick and mortar stores, and we need to support those brick and mortar stores.
100%. What filling mechanism do you think is most interesting, regardless of if you actually like to use it or
not? Okay, so the current bulk filler, or those wonderful filling systems from Gravitas pens, is probably going to be one of the most sort of the most used answers, or most given answers in this, I would imagine. But personally, the old snorkel filler from Schaefer, that is my absolute favorite. I think it is so much fun. A good friend of mine, Michael Liu at Platypus Pens. I don't know if you're familiar with Platypus Pens. It's an Australian small pen maker. Michael Liu runs it out of Melbourne. He does 3D printed pens, but he's a vintage pen lover, and he introduced me to one of the Schaefer pens that has the snorkel filler. And like the first time I used it, I was just giggling. It is just fun. I love it.
To say that one's come up a lot lately, but previous to that, it had been the Visconti Power Vac.
Yeah.
I really like that.
It feels so good to use. Any vac filler, I think, feels really great to use. And there's a sense of power with using it as well for some reason, like it's science doing something in fountain pens. But, I think the problem with something like the vac filler, particularly with, I'm going to say I love the Visconti Homo sapiens, but I think the problem with it is that you don't know how much ink unless you get one like the Skyline ones, you don't know how much ink you have in it. It's kind of fiddly to clean, all of that kind of stuff. So in terms of cleaning, you can't go past the cartridge converter. It's just so easy. Just if you don't want fuss, go with that. But if you want something that's interesting, the vac fillers are great. But if you want something that's really fun and really interesting, go with snorkel.
What nib size do you prefer to write with?
So this depends on what I'm writing and what I'm writing in. So, for instance, if I'm writing in my Hobonichi or in one of my grid books, I would generally lean towards a fine or an extra fine. If I'm journaling, the broad I have on my Pilot Custom 823 is my favorite nib to journal with. Firstly, the feel of that nib on the page is amazing, but journaling is one of my ways to sort of have fun and explore inks as well. So it's nice to be able to, see a lot of it on the page. And when you've got something that has the ink capacity of like the 823, the broad is great. So yeah, I don't have a particular nib size that I go to more than any other, but I do have nib sizes I go to for specific things.
Is there a style of nib you love or find interesting but never would actually use?
See, I'm left-handed. I'm left-handed, right? So I find flex nibs or soft nibs aren't great for me. Something about pushing that flexible nib across the page, it's icky. So I'd have to say something like that. I think they're amazing, and I think watching some of those, the Magna Carta flex nibs, I want to get my hands on just to try it out. But I'd have to sort of work out how to write with it. Same with the stub nib. A simple stub nib sort of just doesn't give the same effect. It ends up just writing broad all the time. So I generally use an architect nib, because if a right-handed writer is writing with the stub nib, the same angle is achieved for a left-handed writer by using an architect. So we can actually get some shape in our writing that way. But yeah, I'd love to be able to use flex nibs and stub nibs more.
Interesting. So my mom's a lefty. She loves a stub and hates my architect.
Really? Does she print or cursive?
Both.
Yeah.
And she loves, I think she's got stub nibs on like 4 of her pens right now.
That's amazing.
Loves a stub. So it's always I find it always interesting to talk to lefties because there doesn't seem to be a consensus. Like some of them, I interviewed somebody a couple weeks ago that loved flex nibs as a left-hander, but most
Right.
hate them because of they really
Yeah.
as well. So it's always an interesting conversation.
I think it's a lot. Right-handed writers generally tend to have a more narrow range of angle on the page. Like in terms like there's less variation in how they hold the pen and the angle which they write on generally. Like whereas left-handed writers, you've got so many variations on what works. And so if you're very much I tend to be sort of like a cross between like a side writer and an underwriter. So if you're an underwriter, I think the stubs and the flex are slightly easier because you're sort of slightly closer to mirroring the right-handed hand position. So yeah, I think there's so many variations that it comes down to, and also even down to it depends on the paper that the person uses, because for instance, if you're using a slightly toothy paper, if you're using a soft nib, that's just going to grip all the time. So yeah, but that's what's fun about this hobby, isn't it? Or this interest is that everyone has what they love, and no two people are the same.
Yeah, no, it's always again. I've filmed like 60 plus episodes of this show, and it's always an station. I always learn something.
Absolutely.
Do you always use the same paper? If so, what paper? If not, what paper's your favorite?
Okay, so I'm trying to once again being a reviewer, I get a lot of paper through that I have to work through. And so I don't find myself using the same paper like all the time. It depends sort of what I'm looking at. So if I get a notebook from a particular brand, I'm using that for quite a while. But generally speaking, if it's sitting on my desk, it's either Rhodia or Any Day Now paper. So Any Day Now it's actually called, the paper is called Notemaker paper, and the brand that it comes in is Any Day Now. It's an Australian brand of notebook, and the paper is sort of slightly toothy but really fountain pen friendly. If it's my everyday carry is like the Midori little pocket-sized notebook. I love Midori paper. My planners are all Paper Republic with their beautiful paper. So there's lots of different kinds of paper. I love Midori paper a lot. I think that's probably my favorite standard paper, more than Tomoe River or anything like that. But in terms of what I use Clairefontaine for my reviews. I use Tomoe River for ink reviews, and then it's whatever is coming through my desk.
Hey, what's your least favorite ink/ink color family?
Okay, I'm going to annoy a lot of people with this answer. So, and maybe I think I might annoy you with this answer. I've used a number of Ferris wheel press inks that they're just too light for me, and so it's just a brand that there are some that are great, but as a general thing, as a brand, it's just not one that hits every mark for me. Same with Jehaban. A lot of those inks are just too dry or too light. But as a general rule, I'm kind of a bit. I have been described as basic and boring occasionally, because I like my darker, solid, standard ink colors a lot, like blue, blacks, black, good, rich dark blues, dark greens, dark browns, dark reds. Sort of that dark academia is like my color world in a way. So writings I will use for art and things like that, but generally so the inks I kind of avoid are things like inks that sheen a lot. That just doesn't appeal to me. It's also harder to clean, and you end up with flakes of things from every time you open the bottle that end up on your desk and end up then on your floor and on the bottom of your feet and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I avoid high sheening inks. I avoid shimmer inks. It's just not something that looks great for me on the page. It doesn't appeal to me. but yeah, so like, but if I can get an ink that is rich and dark in a sort of a nice sort of warm tone, that I'll just go there. I that's my, what interests me.
Honestly, I don't disagree with you as much as you think I will. Delicately. Thanks for
Mm,
the questions.
thank you.